Yo, what's up, everybody? How you doing? It's your man Jay Kev here with my partner in upbuilding and positivity, peace and prosperity. I was gonna say partner in crime, but we can't. We're not criminals. We are assets to the community. We are not men, menaces. No, we're not. We're not menaces to society. But thanks for joining us, two shy guys in the mic. Two shy guys who are not so shy, but still kind of shy. Just here having a conversation about all things health, wealth, relationships, happiness, everything in between, whatever may be on your dome. I don't know. It's been a while since we've been on, so just wanted to come on and say hello and hopefully have a conversation. Leif, just going to talk about the power of positive representation, the power of having positive representation as far as images and things that are constantly held before us in our society and our culture. And Leif, a couple of things that's kind of gotten me going this direction is one thing is the passing of Chadwick Boseman and how that, and just realize looking at the impact that his death has had, just on everybody in general, but particularly in the African American community or the Black community, as far as one of his roles, playing Black Panther, in the Marvel universe, and how that role is and its impact and its level of positive representation in the Black community. Not only that, but just Chadwick Boseman as a man, and what he represented, and as far as what I can tell, as far as the legacy that he has left, he's left a pretty powerful, strong, and positive legacy that is impacting a lot of lives and will probably continually do so for some time. Not only him, as I'm talking, I'm thinking about Kobe Bryant. And I'm thinking about another guy. I'm thinking about Akon. Just thinking about him being in the news, back in the news cycle, with him raising 4 billion to 6 billion, a couple of billion, to get his city start, to get that underway, and what that means and what that represents when it comes to people of color, when it comes to Black people, when it comes to Africans, African Americans, Americans, Black Americans. Just anybody who's looking for positive representation of what humans and what people in general, men and women in general, can do when it comes to the uplifting and upbuilding of their communities and the world in general. So just thinking about some of those examples that are thrown out, and just thinking about the power of positive representation and what that can do, and as far as community concerns, and as far as the impact when it comes to shaping present day behavior, and not only that, but future behavior. It's very powerful. If it wasn't so, companies and corporations would not spend millions and billions to influence us through images and influence our behavior through representation. They would not spend so buku's amount of money to affect the things that we perceive, and what is constantly held before our eyes and our ear gates, and the things that affects us as people. So it's very important. It's essential that in today's time that we do our best to cultivate positive images and to cultivate positive representations. Again, it shapes our perception, it shapes our thoughts, our emotions, and ultimately it shapes our behavior, which affects the collective behavior, which puts us on a trajectory of, could be one of good or one of bad. So just thinking about those things, and just looking at your field of work, your field of profession, given that of design and animation and some of the things that you're doing, I know that you have a thorough understanding of representation and how important it is that we have images that provoke us and push us to do better, and not worse.
Yeah, and so just going back to the beginning, talking about Chadwick,
Yes.
um, and how important it was and what he did, and how representation plays into that. People that are represented don't understand what it's like not to be. So it's very hard for a lot of people to wrap their minds around the concept of representation,
Yeah.
because they see themselves so prevalently in society. Black Panther was one of, it's probably still my kid's most watched movie.
Yes.
Yeah, one of my daughters, like, she could literally quote the whole movie. We just stopped watching TV with her because she
Wow.
knows the entire movie, like,
That's
literally.
amazing.
Yeah, and so that, and then it made me think about Princess and the Frog, just any show that had black representation in it, and even I always mention Into the Spider-Verse, which was what inspired me to actually move forward and
Yeah, that's another one. Yeah.
pursue character design, as a career. And so those things are very vital, and they're very important, and you can't basically underemphasize how important it is, or even, I mean, you can't overemphasize. I'll say that because
Yeah.
it's extremely important, especially for people that don't have that representation, and you see it playing out in society. For example, one of the things that was new to me, I think I've talked about it on the show before, but when we were in our accelerator, Lamar and I were like the only two black guys in the entire accelerator. It was
What's an
about
accelerator?
accelerator is a business accelerator. Is basically you get investment, and they help you springboard your company into financing. They help you they gather investors. They teach you the ropes. You talk to a lot
And
of CEOs of different companies, so on and so
it's in a
forth.
boot camp setting, right? Very compressed.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a boot camp, but it is a boot camp. It's a
Right.
boot
Right.
camp in that it's like it's literally an accelerated process.
Yes.
And
Yes.
instead of spending all your time trying to figure it out on your own, you get a
And that's
bunch
what
of
I mean.
resources that you can talk to, that kind of stuff. Anyway, long story short, there were about 50, minimum of 50 people in the accelerator, and a lot of them, probably a vast majority of them, were from other countries. And what we found was that their only representation of black people was literally from television. Like, a lot of the stuff that they saw on TV, they thought was real. Yeah, and when you think about all the ways black people are represented on TV, and most of them are not positive, then you understand why people have a skewed perspective on what black people are really like. And some of the people that they would watch, I'm like, I had never even heard of these people, but it was like straight buffoonery, right? And so they was like, oh, they don't do this, and I'm like, no, man, that ain't real. And so representation is vitally important, especially for people outside of your race, or even outside of your demographic, right? Even your
Yes.
cult. We talk about representation, it could be cultural representation, which is different than racial representation and those kinds of things. So those things play a major impact on how others see you, but more importantly on how you see yourself.
Yes.
And I was watching what's his name? I think his name is Ryan Davis. He's a comedian, and he was talking about the impact of Black Panther for him. How he, until he saw it, he didn't really think about not seeing himself. And when he did, he said it changed him in a way that is like, oh man, okay, I see myself. I can be, I'm represented. These things have a positive impact on me, and it just really touched him to his core in a sense. And so again, just thinking about the whole spectrum of representation is really important. And one nuance I do want to throw in there, because I had been thinking about this oddly enough before you mentioned it, is we don't have to do it all in one movie. And
Okay.
and what I mean by that, like, if you watch like any shows on Netflix or whatever, it's like everybody tries to cram every single demographic in every single movie, which is kind of disingenuous to me.
It's
Go ahead.
Just kind of a backlash, kind of a response, a clamoring
Yeah,
to
it's
set the
kind of
record
like
straight as fast as possible.
yeah, it's kind of whack to me. And it's just like I think instead of trying to cram everything into every single thing that comes out, just spread it out. Just like let people tell their own stories, because the funny thing, the irony behind a lot of the representation we see is it's not us making it. A lot of the black representation you see on television, that you see in marketing, that you see in a whole lot of different things, they may have black people participating, but they're not the creators, which is another problem as well, because you still get a skewed perspective on what that representation is. So for all of you all that that don't necessarily pay attention to the entertainment industry or pay attention to marketing
closely,
anytime you see something, always go and see who the creators are, and that'll give you an insight onto who's really pushing it, who's really doing it. And that's not to say that that the representation is still not needed. But again, the thing that you have to realize, I know it's not necessarily where you're going, that money will go to people to represent how you should be represented versus the people that are actually in the demographic that needs to be represented. So in other words, I'll go to a Jewish guy, and I'm saying Jewish on purpose because a lot of the creators are in fact Jewish. Good, bad, or indifferent, that's just what it is. If you go look up, especially in the animation industry, if you just go look at the names, look at the list of people, and it's like, oh, okay, this person does this, and this, and you may have thought that the whole time it was somebody of color or whatever, right? And so when you start looking into that, it gives you insight into where the dollars are going, and also there's a lot of other factors that are involved, which leads into opportunities. And opportunities to actually write and create these shows, or opportunities to be the marketing agency to represent a specific demographic or whatever. And so then you see how deeply entrenched not only representation goes, but the opportunity for that representation as well. So it's a big topic. It's very nuanced.
Yes.
It's nuanced and it isn't in a sense.
There's a lot of avenues for conversation as far as rabbit trails that you can go down when it comes to representation and the power of it and how important it is, given that, having positive representation, like you said, affects self-image. And when you're talking about self-image, you're constantly reshaping and reforming your self-image from the memory that you have of your image. So when you let's take, Black Panther, when that image gets implanted in your imagination, in your mind, then you can focus on that, and you can you consciously, or a lot of times subconsciously, start shaping a lot of your thoughts, your emotions, your behavior around the image that's been planted in your imagination. And I guess, in thinking about positive representation and thinking about self-image, I'm thinking about a interview I listened to the other day about this very topic and this very thing, and that this is why it's important that we take the time to really think about the images and think about the culture that we cultivate around us, and that, who we are in the present is constantly being shaped and formed according to the memory that we have in our imagination. This is why imagination is so powerful, and why it's important that we think about the things that we allow to occupy our imagination, and that subconsciously we move towards the pictures or the picture that is in our imagination. The power of the imagination is everything around us comes from our imagination first. So it's essential that we think about what we allow to occupy our imagination.
And here's what's funny, right? So I'm watching the NBA. I love the NBA. But if you think about that in terms of, I always get, I guess, get upset when people's like, you got to teach our kids that, life is more important than dribbling a basketball and this kind of thing. However, when you look at, when we're talking about representation in television and those kinds of things, sports are pushed way more than everything else. So it's easy to say like, oh, well, they need to do this. No, well, if you look at the representation on television, the place where you see the most black people is typically in entertainment. That's why that's always deemed as the way to get out, right? When you look at rich, wealthy, black representation, which is the reason why there needs to be a variety of representation, right? And not just these skewed images, is that, okay, we over-index in sports and we over-index in entertainment in terms of music. So everybody's perception or way, especially young kids that, that really can't decipher between, reality versus what some adults can't either. We see this now, obviously, that, they can't decipher between what's real and what's fake. When they see these images, it's like, okay, if I want to be rich, if I want to be wealthy, then I need to play sports or I need to be in entertainment, because that's what these images are telling me on a consistent basis.
Not only that, I need to do it this way.
Yeah, exactly. They're showing you the path. They're saying that this is what's rewarded, in good, bad, or indifferent. And then when you start thinking about the representation in terms of other media, it's always the same cycled information, right? It's the same recycled stories. And so that plays a huge impact, not only on our kids and what they, strive to be, but it also even dictates our own taste, especially when it comes to marketing, when it comes to purchasing. A lot of these things, again, it's so like the repetition of it, I don't think people really understand. I remember I used to tell my roommate back in college years ago, and I was like, you need to watch the music you're listening to, because it affects your attitude and the way you talk. And he was like, no, I don't do that. He's cussing and all this. I'm like, basically, you're proving my point, And so, and even for myself, I had because I used to curse like everybody else, like when I was, young. And then I was like, what? I just decided to stop. And one of the ways for me to stop was the things that I was basically entrenching myself in, right?
Did you go through a purging period?
Yeah, I mean, I just quit listening to all the things because I saw the impact that it was having on me. And one of the things that actually made me realize it, it's funny how those things happen. Like we were young, and it was like our little cousin, she was a little kid. She's like 2 or 3. And we was listening to a song. It was actually, I remember the song, actually. It was, shows how old it is. It was a Snoop song back when he was with the Dog Pound, right? Okay. And there was this part, and then she just stepped in and just like screamed out, F-bombs, and it's like, man, we didn't realize that what we was listening to was affecting her because we didn't think about it. Just like most people don't think about most of the stuff that they do. They just do it. It's just part of their culture, part of their environment, the whole nine. And I see this with little kids that we had in our class. It was the same thing. They would come to class listening to all kinds of stuff. And it's like, what are you listening to? Well, my daddy listens to it, so it's okay for him. And that was a literal answer, and they listen to all kinds of stuff, and they're like 10 years old. And then you wonder why they have some of the behavioral issues that they have. That, it's not just that, but
that adds to it.
Yeah, it adds to it. It's the culture. It's the representation that they strive to be, right? When they think about what it means to be successful, especially in a skewed way, it has nothing to do with the path of education, because that's not what's presented to them. And the reason why it's very powerful, Lupe Fiasco, he did a live, and it was very good, actually. I know some people probably won't necessarily agree with him, but he was talking about a lot of the issues that go on in Chicago and in certain parts of Chicago, and he was actually blaming hip hop music. And the reason that he was blaming, I mean, think about it, he's an artist himself. And he was like, the reason why it's so detrimental is because there's nobody in a lot of these homes to tell the kids that this is not real, or that there's, this is this is
A
allegory, so to
facade
speak.
yeah.
Yeah, you know what I'm saying? This is hyperbole. You know, these things are exaggerated, you know, because entertainment, most entertainment is exaggerated, you know, exaggeration of reality. And he said these kids don't get that, so they don't understand that there's other options. They just don't get it. And so this is another reason why representation matters in terms of variety. You know, just the scope of things that you can, you know, strive to be, the scope of things that you can learn about, a scope of things, you know, that you can strive for. I remember Chris Gardner, the guy from Pursuit of Happiness.
Yeah.
He did a talk at the Opera House here in Lexington, and I was there, and he was talking about, you know, the difference between his growing up and the people that he met. You know, he's like, you know, they're taking their kids on these movie sets, and, you know, they know about all of these different jobs and this stuff that I've never even heard of. But from, you know, from being a kid on up, they get to see this world, and they know about all of these different opportunities where, you know, he's a grown man and he's like, I didn't even know this stuff existed. And so when you talk about representation, it's not only just about the entertainment aspect of it, but it's representation in fields, it's representation on councils, it's representation in laws, it's representation in just about everything you can think of, and even in technology, right? People don't think about representation in technology, but, you know, we're on camera right now. A lot of the cameras weren't designed to film Black people because that's not the setting designed it around.
Yeah, that is interesting. You said that. I was listening to, I think, Patrick Wood. He wrote the book, a couple of books. One of them is, I think, Technocracy Rising, and another one's talking about technocracy. And I don't know if it's him, but it's somebody talking about the people who set up Silicon Valley, and with AI is set up to not read Black people's faces. It's in a, you know, just thinking about the power of representation is that if you're not represented in the algorithm that is going to be that is being part of the foundation of the fourth industrial revolution, then what does that say? If the algorithm can't recognize, you know, whatever it means, I guess African facial features, I don't know the exact way to say it or phrase it, but that's an issue if somebody's writing programs or algorithms that is skewed or biased or is not representing me, you know, or somebody looks like me. That's an issue.
And here's the thing to think about: everybody has skewed or biased anything, right? That's the reason why the diversity is necessary. So you can spread the bias around in a sense, right? You can lessen the bias based on the input of all the people at the table. And that's part of the issue with the representation. Again, is not just the, you know, when most people think about positive representation, it has to do with being seen on the screen or whatever. But even in these councils, one of the reasons why, like years ago, I quit. I still participate, but not on the level I used to. I used to be in a lot of these boards or a lot of these meetings is because somebody told me that, like, if you're not there, then you don't get heard. Okay. Right. And that's another reason why representation, it matters, whether it's positive or whatever. And that's the same thing with, you know, we talk, everybody talks about election, you know, coming up, but, you know, they're mostly talking about the presidential election, but
there's a lot of,
you're less likely to get minority participation. I don't even like the word minority, but I'm just talking about it from a majority population versus a smaller segment of the population. That's the only way I'm using it, is the participation in school board meetings. You know, I've only been at the school board meetings because, you know, we were being presented because my kids aren't in the school system, so I don't have to show up. But I do show up because other kids that look like my kids are affected by the decisions that happen in those school board meetings. You got council meetings that are open to the public. Those are the kinds of things where you need real participation, because you get to see what happens in your local vicinity, what happens with your own tax dollars, what happens with, you know, when you read about new schools going up, most people are like, oh, my kids will go here, will go there. But what they don't think about is all the money that goes into building those schools. You're talking about, like, Lexington is a fairly small city. right? It's not a huge populated city like a New York City or anything like that. But when
Right.
you think about the buildings that go up, you're talking about hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars that's being pushed into the, the
Infrastructure.
economy, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's being pushed into the economy. But if you don't have representation, then guess what? You don't get any of those economic dollars. So that's also an important part of it as well, is making sure that you represent yourself. And so you have to show up to some of these meetings, because they have bid meetings. They have meetings talking about where these dollars will go. And a lot of the problem is a lot of people don't show up. They don't know about it. And if they do know about it, they don't show up. They're not represented at the, to make bids on some of these high dollar values. Like, literally, there's so much money that goes around. You could create a business just from the economic injection of some of these projects, right? And so it's stuff like that we have to think about. You mentioned Akon, and one of the things that I hope happens with his city building and his planning is that he actually has people on the infrastructure side that represent the city that they're building. Because a lot of times these tech companies, they'll have these tech structures, and they're not Black people involved in building stuff for Black people. So you have to you have to look at all of that stuff, right? And all of that stuff is vitally important in terms of, having the right kind of representation, and not only that, but having representation that actually cares about you. It's one thing to represent me. It's another thing to actually be representing me in a way that's beneficial to me. So make sure that you all look into that kind of stuff whenever these things come up. Pay attention. That's really all I'm just saying. Just pay attention to that. Demand more and support more too, right? When we talk about representation, then this is more or less for screen time, but also from a variety of different ways: business representation, marketing, all kinds of things. Go ahead.
So when you see good positive representation, it's to my benefit to support that, to help that continue on. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I mean, you have to, right? You have to support, and support can come in a variety of ways.
Oh yeah.
But for the most part, it's like, what they say: put your money where your mouth is, right?
Yeah.
If you're not putting money into these things, which is easier from an entertainment standpoint, only because those things are public knowledge in terms of money. It's like, oh, the box office record is this, blah, blah, blah. I was actually earlier, I was looking at a master class of what's her name? Let me look up her name real quick. The woman, the editor of Vogue, Anna Wintour. And she was talking about covers, and how, they put Naomi Campbell on the cover of one of the Vogues when she took over as editor. And, she's like, she didn't think anything about it, but the board members of the people representing, I forgot the company that owns Vogue. But anyway, they were like, oh, can you put a Black woman on the cover? Will we get sales and all of that kind of stuff, right? Which is, again, another representation thing. However, the difference is something that's not controlled by us, right? It's not controlled by the people being represented. And so, but anyway, she was like, it got pushed through, and is one of their most successful covers, which was one of the issues that they were trying to say behind the whole Black Panther thing, right? And that could have been a marketing ploy for real. It's like, do Black superheroes do numbers? Do Black leads, make money? But I mean, you got Will Smith has been, he's been one of the top actors for a long time. So that's kind of a false narrative when they talk about, do Black leads make money, so on and so forth.
Right.
And so again, just pay attention to this stuff. Pay attention to what's out there. Pay attention to not only what's being represented, but how it's being represented, or the lack of representation. All of those things really matter. And like I said, make sure that you support it, whether it be through views, whether it be through purchasing, whether it be through support, helping, working with, hiring, all of those kinds of things. It all matters. And again, just, make sure that it's not to your detriment. And what I mean by that is, like, the attorney general for Kentucky, right? He's supposed to be doing the Breonna Taylor case, and he's done nothing. Everybody's like, oh, he's a black man, but he doesn't necessarily care about the representation of the people that he's, covering. It's like, so just be careful about, who's doing the representation and why. The why always matters. The why always matters, because a lot of things seem innocent enough, but sometimes they're really not.
Well, one of the things I want is, we got any comments or anything?
No, not right now. No.
Okay. One of the things I wanted to focus on, I guess, with the positive representation was bringing it back to how it shapes self-image, and
Yes.
like, what are some things that we can do when it comes to cultivating a environment where you have positive representation, and how it affects our self-image. Like, what are some things that we can do? Like, one of the things that you were talking about when you were talking about traveling and
Yes.
just exposing ourselves and our children to different, they call it culturing.
Yep.
You're cultured. You're very cultured. Just exposing ourselves to different ways of living, different ways of being, and just getting as many perspectives and viewpoints on life as we can, which opens you up and makes you aware, and it helps you when it comes to the representation and how it's shaping, your mind or our children's thoughts, emotions, and behavior.
Yeah, and also be fearless. And what I mean by being fearless is, sometimes you have to be the representation yourself. Sometimes you have to be the one in the space. Sometimes you have to be the one to speak up. Sometimes you have to be the one to think about other people. And so if you find yourself, privy, like, for example, if you're in your own city, I know a lot of people in Lexington. There's a lot of places that Lexington people have, especially Lexington Black people, have never been in their own city, right? Because, they don't feel comfortable going in or whatever. And it's like, you have to get over that. You have to be willing to, like, for the sake of your children, to move forward and do things and expose them to new avenues. I've never ridden a horse before, but I rode it with my kids just to expose them to it, right? There's a lot of different things you can do. There's a lot of events that happen that you have to basically interject yourself in and make yourself aware. It's not going to just happen for you. I know you do the same thing with your kids. You do a lot.
But when you was talking about the event you invited us to with the virtual reality and stuff, and that was like, at the time, that was like out of my lane. And I was like, oh, okay, let's go down here and see what this is all about. And I felt uncomfortable when I got there after meeting and greeting and just talking and stuff. I was like, okay, it's no big deal, Yeah.
And that's why you have to live your life sometime. Like you said, other cultures, just seeing how other cultures are, and it's not just representation for just you only or your demographic, but it's just for other people. It's like, oh, okay, this is how they do this. This is very interesting. The world's a very fascinating place. If you stay on social media and just get caught up in all the polarization, then you'll miss the beauty of life, right?
Oh, man.
And so just make sure that you don't get caught up in all this nonsense, because social media life versus a lot of your real lives don't even match up sometimes. So you got to be real careful with that, and who's pulling the strings and all of that kind of stuff, which is another thing of representation. Are they representing the truth, right? Representation of the truth, and not just the people or demographic. But
so how do you get to the truth? By asking questions.
Yeah, just investigate. Like, and investigate doesn't necessarily even mean a lot of taking hours at a time. Sometimes it's just a matter of, like, okay, I see, like, for example, when I see new shows, and again, I'm specifically looking at it for career moves or whatever. But when I see new shows come out, it's like, okay, who made this? Who's the company that represents the people that made this? And it's just literally just type up who's the creator.
And we talked about that before.
All the information shows up. Yeah.
With movies and stuff, I'm the same way. Yeah. It's like, who made it? What is their perspective on life? Yep. And how is this shaping the movie? And what are the messages that they have implanted consciously or subconsciously in the movie that is affecting me and I think and live.
All of that. I mean, the internet's a fascinating place. There's a lot of information, to be had. That stuff is given up freely. Like literally, they post. I mean, you could probably find scripts in the whole nine, right? And so just be curious, man. I mean, that's the beauty of life, just staying curious. And by being curious, you have to have some form of fearlessness involved in that, to explore the new spaces, to partake in new things, to get over yourself sometimes, right? What I found a lot of times when people are unsure of themselves, they get, they feel inadequate. Like you said, I felt uncomfortable, and sometimes you just had to get over yourself, because the level of comfort is of your own making. Sometimes it's not that people don't want you there. It's that it's just your own perceptions, which again goes back to, the represents and seeing stuff and, feeling that they could be part of your own world or your own life. So yeah, man, that's important as well, man. So yeah, just make sure that, how you cultivate that kind of stuff, especially for your children, because, my children are still young. I know yours are as well. And just to reinforce some of this stuff, pre-COVID anyway, we try to take them to as many places as possible, get them to meet as many people as possible, have conversations with as many people as possible. We talk about stuff. We talk, I know you do it with your kids. When you watch something, you all have a dialogue about it. All of those kinds of things are important, right? And and it's like, well, if there's questions of why, it's like, why is this hero not like this, then you can even delve into that. It's like, well, part of the problem is we aren't making the stories. Sometimes the problem is we're waiting on the wrong people to co-sign our creations. And instead of waiting on a streaming service or anything like that, or a channel, now you have the opportunity to create your own whatever. I just saw it was earlier today. I want to say it's Comic Noir something. It's a black comic book company, and they, I saw the advertisements today. Stuff like that. Put out your own media. Just create. And this is just from a visual representation standpoint. Create your own. And your story doesn't have to encompass everybody. I think that's dumb personally. Like when I watch certain shows, I'm like, I don't care if a black person or somebody else is in it, because it just doesn't fit this particular narrative. Okay. If it fits, then great. If it doesn't, then guess what? Somebody else needs to tell the story, right? If you think this, and that's why, I got to the point where I don't get mad at other people's creations, because then I just point the finger back at myself. It's like, if you think this needs to happen, then you make it happen. I can't dictate to you what you do with your life, but I can dictate to me what I do with mine. And so sometimes when we think about the representation standpoint, the reason why it's not there is because we're not stepping up. And so that's,
you place the ball back in my court.
Yeah, I mean, you have to, right? I believe in the mantra, you create the world you want to see. And so we have to be willing. If I'm willing to complain about something, I also need to be willing to do something about it.
Okay.
I personally hate people that complain with no effort to even change anything, because they're a bigger part of the problem than anything as far as I'm concerned. So if you're around me and you complain, I may or may not say something to you, but I definitely ain't gonna rock with you, and that's real.
You may say, okay, what are you gonna do about it?
Yeah, I always say that. So what are you gonna do about it? Hey, it's like, man, this is messed up. They did so. It's like, okay, so what are you gonna do about it? Are you just gonna sit here and do nothing?
No, I'm just gonna post it on Facebook, and that's it.
Yeah, and so if you take that initiative, is like, okay, what am I gonna do about it? Whether it be your children, whether it be something else, like, what are you going to do about it? And if you're not doing anything about it, why not? So yeah. So anyway, I don't want to split off into a whole nother subject, but yeah, representation.
Yeah, that is going into another direction. That's one of the questions you posed to me back in the days. What are you gonna do about it?
Yeah.
Okay, all this stuff is going on.
Right.
Don't be
And
having me no problems.
yeah, it's like, hey man, I found out that 2 + 2 = 4, bro. It's like, okay.
Okay, what we gonna do?
Yeah, it's like, and yeah, it's, I don't know. But that's part of the problem of being a spectator. Sometimes you get stuck in that mode of just watching.
It's all of us are given to that at times, just given human nature, and also just looking
Yeah,
at the
definitely.
level, just looking at the level of the possibilities of spectation these days with all the different avenues that we have our at our behest. So we all, which goes back to taking the time to think about some of the things that we are allowing in our environment, and then, like you said, what are we going to do about it if it's something that was not to our liking? So that's all I had for today, Leif. Just thinking about Chadwick Boseman, and then thinking about Akon and Kobe, and just thinking about just positive representation of just what it means to be a good person, and just having some positive things that are represented before us, and the impact of that versus the alternative, and the impact of that, and how important it is. So just want to think about that, talk about it, and just have a conversation about it.
Yeah, real quick, and even just thinking about it, when you were saying that, I was thinking about just representation on, I guess, a personal level, right? You know, what kind of person are you representing for your community? What kind of person are
Yeah,
you representing for
yeah,
your family? Are you a positive representation of what a man or a woman should be? Are you a positive representation of what a good citizen is? Are you a positive representation of what whatever race you are? Are you a positive representation of just being a human, right? And so, when I thought about Chadwick, of course, it definitely, because you're the one that told me. I came in and you hit me up, because otherwise I was oblivious to everything that was going on, and I was like I was literally just like stunned, like I didn't know how
yeah,
to react. I was like, whoa, and just thinking about just the stuff that people said about him, and just the things that I've seen about him. The one crazy thing about now is that when people die, it's especially superstars, is that because they have so much out there that it's like, as far as you're concerned, they still seem alive.
yep,
It's kind of a weird conundrum, so to speak. And I'm still like having trouble processing him being gone, in a sense.
yeah,
And but the one thing that I always think about, when it does come time for you to die, or anyone, it's like, what kind of legacy have you left behind? And I'm not even talking about his movies, but it's just about the things that he did outside of film, right? That just made a stage for the kind of stuff that he was doing. And so, are you taking advantage of the stage that you have in your own life? Are you taking advantage of, how you represent? Again, I always go back to children, because I cherish my role as a father. I cherish my role as a husband. So I always think about it from that vantage point. It's like, okay, am I doing what's right in my own household? Forget about the world, forget about who's running for president, forget about anything outside of these doors. Am I doing what's right inside of these doors? And then when I go out, how am I further representing that? How am I further standing up for what's right? How am I further, speaking out against injustice, or whatever it is that you're doing? How are you representing that with your life? And are you basically redeeming the time? The scriptures say, redeem the time, right? Are you thoughtfully redeeming the time that you have in the here and now? Because it's very limited. We see with these people, I still think about my dude Chewy, who's in Lexington. He was only 22 years old. And every time I think about it, I'm like, dang, like, it just hits me every now and then. I'm like, he's gone. And so,
but the impact he left.
Yeah. But again, it's like, are you redeeming the time? Quick shout out, because I announced it on here when I started. I'm I was a year in on my journaling last week because I started doing the journaling live on here on Two Shy Guys. So I just wanted to throw that out there. But one of the things, and the reason why I mentioned that is one of the things that I write down in my journal every day when I do it first thing in the morning when I wake up, or first thing whenever I wake up, is, I contemplate whether or not I'm really utilizing my time on earth wisely, because it's only so much time we have. We don't know what that number is, but there's only so much time that we have, and I try to think about that consciously, right? It's like, okay, I'm doing some work. How does this work affect me long term? Okay, this work will bring in some revenue. This work, I can use this revenue to do X, Y, Z. I can spend this amount of time. I make sure that I set aside time specifically for my wife and my children. It's like, no matter what, I want to make sure that I make them feel special today, right? So those kinds of things that we can do in terms of being a positive representative, because those are the things that when I think about Chadwick Boseman, it was just because I've seen a lot of his movies. I think I've seen all his movies except for two. And it's just like, again, the person that I saw in the interviews, and just the verification of the people that knew him, those are the kind of things that matter, man. That's what really matters. It goes beyond just the Black Panther. It goes beyond just, bringing in some money and flexing on Instagram or Facebook. It's really the impact that you had in the lives of people and how you made them want to be better. So again, we talk about positive representation. Make sure that you live that every day. Make sure that you strive to be better, period. Everybody has a starting point, but better is always attainable. So yeah, that's all I got, bro.
Man, you said positive representation, causing someone to aspire, inspiring someone to aspire to do better.
Yep.
So that's all we got for today. Just having a conversation about positive representation, how important and how powerful it is in today's world, and especially with relationship to tomorrow's world.
Yep.
So that's all we got for today. Hit like, share, comment. Let us know what you think. Let us know you're out there. We definitely appreciate the time and attention that you spend with us. We don't take it for granted, and hopefully the investment, you get some kind of return. I don't know what flavor the return is going to be in, but hopefully it's a good, positive return and not a negative. We just don't want to take, but we want to give. So that's all we got.
Make sure you give it to somebody else. Peace.
Yep.